Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to read, or sorry, we're going to learn. I'm a little tired. I just didn't want to go to sleep before we did this, before we crashed through the next part of this amazing episode. This episode, I decided that the classes need a individual name. We can't call them all Key to Redemption. That gets boring to the today's world that is very, very much into titles. We have to make the external flashy as well. So I went back to all the earlier classes on Key to Redemption, and I named each episode with its own name, expressing somewhat of the content of that episode. So this one is called Bottoms Up, because that's the content of this class, and we are holding in class number 2. This is the Dvar Malchus. This is episode number 9 of this series, class number 2. This is the Rebbe's talk that he gave on the 28th of Sivan. So in today's morning's class, you should listen to the class number 1. We explained that the Rebbe explained that the month of Sivan, which is the month of Torah, comes to its full expression and power on the 28th, because the 28th is gematria, the numeric value is koach. Koach means power of the Torah, and it's connected to the idea that it is 3, because 28 comes after 27, and 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. So, and that is the power, because 3 is strength. So when something repeats itself 3 times and then you have a triple 3, you have a very strong 3. And that is that we also discussed the idea that the Rebbe's, the reason he gave this talk was he's explaining his coming to America on this day. And in the earlier class, what is the relationship? Because the Rebbe came to the United States on this day. As I mentioned in the previous class, he came twice on this day, which is really, you see the divine providence in it. On the very same day, a few years apart, he arrived there 2 times on that day, indicating that his coming to the United States of America, his setting his feet in the United States of America, was part of the evolution of Torah. What's the evolution of Torah? Torah is meant to bring and make the unholy world, the lowly, dark, ungodly world godly. And the way Torah does it is not just that it reaches far, far, far deep and penetrates deep into the world, but even deeper than that, the Torah uncovers the godliness that's hidden in the lowest of existence, the lowest point of existence. And it's precisely that lowest point. When you reach that lowest point, that's when you, oops, I forgot to plug this in here. Hold on 1 second here. Need to increase this. Give me just 1 second here. Do a little bit of a change. Sorry, it's going to be clearer now. The sound receiver wasn't connected. Okay, so the idea being that from the lowest point is where you lift up the entire apparatus, the entire lifted up when godliness is revealed on earth, because the real strength of God, which is his essence, is not worlds of light, and only the physical hides the essence of God. So when we uncover within the physical Hashem, that is a much greater empowerment. And the Rebbe says that that work was primarily started when Torah reached the shores of America, which is the lower part of the world where the Torah was not given, as he brings from his great-great-grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, referring to America, that America was on the side of the world where the Torah was not given, meaning to say, when God gave the Torah, there was a certain purification that happened in creation, and that purification was affected the higher realms of the world, not so much the lower part of the world to the same degree like the upper part. The closer it is to Sinai, the higher and the more impact it had on the physics, on the physical element of creation. This is the lower part, and therefore it is therefore denser, less sensitive to God, more resistant to divine influence, and therefore it's the purpose of everything. That's what we discussed in the earlier class. And that's why the 28th of Sivan, which is the power of the Torah, to reveal the power of God and to reveal the power of the Jewish people and to bring into the world its ultimate power, which is connecting the creation with the Creator, but not just with the emanations of the Creator, but with the essence of the Creator. All of that is related to this day, the 28th of Sivan. Fascinating stuff. Now, in chapter number 3, the Rebbe is going to connect all of this to the week that it came out, which was Parsha Shalach. I'm giving this class already. It's already Sunday. It's already in the next. It's in the area in the next Parsha, Parsha's Korach. But this is still connected to last week's Torah portion, which was the reading of Parsha Shalach. Only a small piece over here, but this is very fundamental. The Rebbe says, why does the 28th of Sivan come out in Parsha Shalach? Everything has to be perfect. So the 28th, we understand the power, the idea of that day. Now the question is, what is the relationship to the weekly portion of Shalach? How does the content of Shalach match up with this idea? So we know that Shalach starts with a mission of sending spies, which turns out to have been a failed mission with devastating consequences. Yet the Rebbe insists, like we learned in episode number 8, if you listen to episode number 8, very important class, that it was not a failure. It was only a failure if you look at it externally. If you look at it deeply, you find that it wasn't a failure. Simply because if it was Moshe who decided to send those spies, Moshe, although we might look at him as a human being, but when we understand a little better who the soul of Moshe is, we understand that Moshe is the embodiment of God's faculty of das, which means God's faculty of knowledge. Each one of the biblical figures, of the righteous main players of the biblical figures, are embodiments, physical embodiments of divine energies. Like Abraham, Avram is the embodiment of kindness, of God's kindness. He's not just a very kind human being. He was the energy of divine kindness manifesting in a physical body, in a human body. He was totally nullified to God. In a sense, we can say an extension of the divine kindness in this world. Same as Moshe, he's the extension of God's mind in this world. That's why he's the one who gives us God's mind, which is the Torah. If that's the case, if this is God's mind, he couldn't have made a mistake. So Moshe sent the spies, it must have been successful. So the Rebbe over here references his previous talk, in which in previous talk he explained that which we're not going to go into right now, but that the spies came back, they fulfilled what they were supposed to do, and that is to report that the land is an amazing land. They brought back the fruits, and the people saw how incredible great it was, and it made such a lasting impact that 40 years later, only the next generation that came into the land were still excited to go into the Israel with added vigor and excitement. If so, we can't look at that mission in the negative light. We have to look at it in the positive light. There was negativity to it, but that was like an extra cancer that grew on top of it. But the essential mission itself was not negative, but it was actually it was successful. If that's the case, the Rebbe says, let's analyze the spiritual element of that mission. And based on that, we're going to see that it's literally what we're talking about. The words that Moshe used when he told them to go check out the land, remember we learned last week, he didn't say to them, you should spy the land. He says, Vayasuru es Eretz Canaan, which as we discussed last week means you should scan the land, you should examine the land, or maybe even you should tour the land. And that's where the English word touring maybe is related to the Hebrew word vayaturu. Now here the Rebbe is going to, however, give us a deeper mystical meaning into the word vayasuru. And he says vayasuru comes from the word to bring out the advantage. There is a verse in I actually did my homework. I said before I got to let's do it right. Let's do it together. I did not know how to pronounce this word. One of the 24 books of the Torah is Keheles. Now, the word for Keheles, I think it is Ecclesias. No, I don't know. So I looked at it. I did pronounce on Google. Today's days, thank God we can get help. So let's listen to it together. I wrote how to pronounce. Let's do this.
Ecclesiastes.
Oh, there we go. Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes. Okay, good. There's a verse in Ecclesiastes. Okay. Now I'm gonna upgrade my vocabulary. In Ecclesiastes, there is a verse where it says that Yisrael ha'or min ha'choshech. There is an advantage to light from darkness. So the advantage, so the word vayaturu means to realize the advantage, the greatness, that there is something more. So Moshe is telling them, go in preparation. See, what's the objective? The spies were sent in order to facilitate the Jewish people conquering the land and settling in the land of Israel. So we always have to look at, we see a story in the Torah, we have to be able to peel away its external. We understand it on the external level as well, but we want to apply something to our lives. We're not the spies. We're not hanging out in a desert eating manna from heaven 3,000 years ago. We're living in a modern world. What does this ancient teaching speak to me today in my own life? So for that, I need to strip the externality of it, and I have to get to the soul of it. So what's the soul of two things? The people settling, conquering the land of Israel. And secondly, what would be the purpose of the spies that was sent to begin that process, to start that conquest? So what does it mean to conquer the land of Israel? It means to conquer my own body. It means to conquer physicality. God gave each and every one of us material. He gave us substance. He gave us a space that's not godly. It's not. It's just simply not. The fact that we can entertain the thoughts of sinning, of doing things that are not what God approves of. The fact that we can spend 5 seconds and God is not in the front of our consciousness means that this is space that God, after Mashiach is revealed, we will not forget God for a millisecond, because he will be piping out of everywhere. He will be screaming from every rock, shouting out from every blade of grass, because that's all we will see is the divine energy. That's the pulsating life in everything. Everything will be included and melted into the godly truth that is in everything. It's the substance of everything. Now our eyes are blinded. Our job is to fix that. Our job is to change that, to change the physical world. And that's what it means. Go into a land that's not holy and make it the land of Israel, which means make it a holy land. So even though you're not doing that literally in Israel, because maybe you're living in Norway, or maybe you're living in Denmark, or maybe you're living in South Korea, or you're living in South Dakota, or you're living in Mississippi, or wherever it is in the world that you are living in. It's that world is God's world. God is the truth of it. Part of it is your own body, your own physical home, your bedroom, your kitchen, your food items, your computer, your exercise machine, your toothbrush, your pillow. Everything we own, everything we have, it's all nothing other than divine energy. That's what it is. Everything is energy and everything is divine. That's the energy. So everything is really God, but that's not what we see. So the conquest of the land is to go into the physical world, radically transform it until the physical world will be expressing the expression of God, that God will make the physical world his ultimate home, which means the place where he is the most comfortable and the most expressed. So now we see conquering the land is not a story about anybody else. This is instruction for me, for my life. Now, what does it mean? What is the job of the spies? God is sending each and every one of us as an introduction to making this world into a home for God. There's something that needs to be done before that, and that's the spies. What are the spies' mission? So the mission is Vayaturu es Eretz Canaan. Vayasuru es Eretz Canaan. Vayaturu es Eretz Canaan. What does that mean? So the Rebbe brings a verse again in Kehelas. I feel stupid already that I keep for some reason I can't remember. Oh, Ecclesiastes. Got it. Another verse in Ecclesiastes 5, verse number 8. It says over there, the Yisrain Eretz Bakoilhu. The advantage of earth is in everything. The Yisrain Eretz Bakoilhu, that there is an advantage to earth. Before we said there's an advantage to darkness, same idea. The advantage to earth is in everything. What it means in the simple meaning of the verse, I forgot to look it up before this class, and I don't recall. You can look it up on your own, learn it with whatever commentaries you want. What the Rebbe is learning over here is a very interesting explanation. Number one is that there's an advantage. One explanation is that earth has an advantage over everything. Everything meaning all the spiritual worlds, heaven and heavens of heavens, and all the worlds of light and revelation, earth has an advantage over all of them. That's one explanation. And there's another explanation. The power that earth has, and like we see, I spoke about this in class number 1, even in our physical world, there are creatures and substances that are more spiritual, that contain a mix of spirit and matter. Like we see, a human being is a mix of spirit and matter. An animal is also a mix of spirit and matter. Even a plant is more of a mixture of spirit and matter. But earth, if there is any spirit there, it's very concealed. So it's just matter. Yet we see, and that's what we discussed earlier, that earth has an advantage because earth feeds all the others. Without earth, no one exists. The plants come from the earth. The animals eat the plant. People eat plants and animals, all coming from the earth. So the earth is hot, and the earth can exhibits a power that none of the sophisticated spiritual beings on earth can produce. No one can produce something from nothing. It's only in God's hands to produce something from nothing. And yet the physical soil produces something from nothing. Okay, it's not nothing, but very close to nothing because of how things grow. Even if you have to kind of alert the earth by putting in a seed, but the seed that you're putting in, first of all, it's tiny compared to what will grow out. What grows out is an abundance from one seed. Secondly, even that seed first rots and decays. There's nothing really left of it. And then the earth produces. So the earth is really producing something from nothing. And that's really a divine power that no other spiritual things have. That's where you see that the Yisrael Eretz, that the earth has incredible power. However, so Bakoil over everything. But now let's learn another interpretation. The earth has enormous power. But the Bakoil, its power is from everything. Not it's more powerful than everything. It's the advantage of earth is of everything because everything is put into it. What does that mean? Earth remains the most unimpressive, most good for nothing entity until the entities that are above earth plant the earth. In other words, earth is the all-powerful, but it will only be the all-powerful if it first surrenders itself to the creatures and beings that are above it. Earth representing the physical will only provide its strength and its greatness if it first relinquishes itself and becomes complete in service and in servitude and submissive to the beings that are more spiritual. For example, First of all, the earth has to let itself be plowed. We discussed in the earlier class. You have to be able to plow it and break it. If we can imagine the earth having nerves, that must be extremely painful. That we break it, crush it, break it, and scratch it, uproot it. But only soft soil will be able to grow. Then earth can't grow unless it receives input from, as we said, from the being. You have to put a plant in. You have to put a seed in. Something has to go in. Who puts the seeds in? Sometimes it happens on its own, right? Certain things fall and they go into the earth. Generally, it's people and animal together. They work together. Then they take the plant, which is the seed from the plant, put it in the earth. So you have plant, animal, and human all working together to put the seed in. Once you put the seed in, and then even that's not enough. Earth can't produce unless it has water. And the water means it has to come from heaven, from the sky, which generally represents the spiritual levels. In other words, spirit needs to download into matter for then to bring out the latent, deep, hidden, dormant power that lies in matter that only matter has, and spirit doesn't. Follow what's going on over here? So you need first all the spiritual forces to descend down into the earth. Then the earth is not just a collector of that energy. The earth collects it all, absorbs it all. But then when the earth doesn't just return it, because if the earth would just return what was put into it, it will return one seed or the seeds that were put into it. That's not worth the investment. The investment is I put in a little seed and then the earth will do its magic. The earth will do what no one else can do. So that's the meaning. The Yisrael Eretz, you want the advantage of earth. Bakoil, you need everything to go into it. Now, kol means everything, who it is. And then after that, the Yisrael Eretz, then the earth will be greater, bakol, over everything. So there's two interpretations here. Now the Rebbe gets a little bit more Kabbalistic, and he explains that kol means everything. I just said means all the higher levels of earth. It represents the realm of spirituality. More in particular, earth, a little bit more mystical, is the last of the divine, God's energy to the world. Comes through a series of attributes. And as the energy gets passed from attribute to attribute, lower and lower and lower, till it comes to the final attribute, which is called Malchus. Malchus is the final attribute, which is the mother of creation. It's a godly, it's a divine attribute, but it's the part of Hashem called the Shekhinah that is embedded within the world. It was the lowest of the attributes, way, way inferior to all the attributes. Yet, the purpose of all the attributes is Malchut, because Malchus is, so to speak, the limit God as he self-limits himself to be the power in the world, to create creation in general, and primarily to create the physical world, and the lowest and the lower elements of the physical, ultimately to create earth. So the real power of Malchus lines up in earth. And what we say over here is like this. Malchus, in the worlds of mysticism, it is explained like this. Even though Malchus is a recipient from all the higher Sephirot, they all have to flow. Malchus has nothing of her own, like the moon. Today is Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a new month. The moon doesn't have any light of its own. The moon must receive light from its big neighbor, luminary, the sun. The sun will provide the moon with its light. Malchus is a recipient, it's a vessel, doesn't have anything. But yet, in truth, she's rooted, the attribute of Malchus, which is feminine, so I'm calling her she, is rooted higher than all the masculine levels. The woman is higher than the man in the source. Rooted in the essence of God, the feminine attribute of Malchus being the most inferior to all, is rooted in the quintessence higher than all the attributes, in the keter, in the crown, in the innermost of the crown, all the way up to in the essence of God himself. Much higher than all the cool, spectacular attributes that are a million gazillion times greater than Malchus. And therefore, the way it works. But Malchus, she's only a recipient. It's the same idea like Earth. She first needs to receive input from all the attributes. Once she receives and takes it in, then eventually she produces her own light. Like it says in the days of Mashiach, the moon will have her own light, not just reflect the sun, but the moon will have her own light, and the moon will be as big as the sun, and then even exceed and go even higher than the sun. That's the ultimate state. Malchus will rise higher than all the attributes. So this is the deeper meaning of the verse. Yisrael Eretz. Eretz, Malchus is also called Eretz, earth. It's a divine earth, the level of earth as it exists within the divine, which is the Malchus, the lowest level. That's why it's called earth. She's receiving Bakol. So what does Kol mean? Everything. So the attribute that's above Malchus, the attribute that's above Malchus is the attribute called Yesod. So Yesod, foundation, is the male who's channeling light down into Malchus. In the male, Yesod is represented the reproductive part of the person, which is the ability to connect and transmit the seed of life into the womb of the woman. So Yesod is called Kol. Why is Yesod called Kol? Because Kol means everything, because it receives from all the powers of God that are higher, all the Sephirot. It takes it all in, it concentrates it all, and then it passes it on. Just like let's use the physical example, just like in the male-female relationship in reproduction. So the seed that is transmitted from Yesod to Malchus is a concentrate of all powers of the person. How can you create a child that is going to have all the features of the father? And that's because the father, in that seminal drop, it concentrates everything. And that goes over to the recipient. And what is the power of the woman? Her womb is that it can create a person. Out of what? Out of a little substance, some putrid, like the Mishnah says, putrid liquid becomes an entire human being. That's the magic of the woman. That's the magic of the recipient. The woman, in this sense, is considered the earth. So, but you have to plant it in her first. And if the woman is not receiving an insemination from anywhere, she can't do anything. So it has to be given to her from higher. But once she gets it, she does her magic and brings out the light. So Malchus must receive from Kol, from Spheres HaYesod, from the attribute of Yesod, which Yesod includes within it all the Sephirot. And then after Yesod gives into Malchus, the real power of Malchus comes out. So this is, and then once Malchus reveals her power, she lifts all the attributes that are higher. She contributes to them because she brings them all into revelation. Let me give a little bit more. In the attributes above, Malchus is the power of speech, divine speech. Like God creates the world through speech. So we look at the power of speech. Speech is an interesting power. Speech doesn't have anything on its own. What speech? An ability to say letters. But what are letters? Nothing. Meaningless letters. I can sit and ramble off ABC all day long. What will it mean? Nothing. It's the content that you're conveying in these letters. It's what you put into speech that is meaningful. If you have poetry, if you're conveying, deep emotions, if you're conveying ideas, intelligence, emotions, Things like that. You're putting it into words, and then it's being transmitted through the speech. So what is the speech doing? Speech is only doing one thing. It's revealing everything. It doesn't have on its own, it's only revealing anything. But we know it's an interesting thing. We find that even though speech is just giving exit, it's giving expression. It's allowing your intelligence and your emotions to exit yourself and go on the outside. Yet we find the interesting thing is that when you speak, people who teach will always know this, you gain such clarity in what you're teaching way more than before you started teaching. The teaching itself enhances the mind that earlier had the conception of the idea, but it wasn't nearly as sharp until you actually articulate it in words. When you put it into words, for some reason, it has an incredible power of enlightening the mind. Same as also emotions. When a person speaks, you can have emotions there dormant in your heart. Maybe you can feel them a little bit. Certain emotions, love, things that you're upset about. But what happens when you start talking about something that you're upset about? Suddenly you can. If you didn't talk about it, it was quiet. And the same is also love. You can talk, if you have love to someone, once you start speaking about it, you can choke up with the love. The emotion can get so intense. Or compassion, right? You have certain things you care about and you have compassion for, but when you start speaking about it, suddenly it overwhelms you that, as we said, it's something you can't talk. So why is that? All you did was you put it into an empty vessel. The answer is the vessel is sourced higher than the light. So when the energy goes into the vessels actually pick up the energy to places higher than the energy was, because the energy are projections of the soul, and the vessels are rooted in the essence of the soul. That's the idea of Malchus. Malchus is so high. And so now, when we are going in, now, let's take this whole idea. Once we find out that the vessel is in the realms of the divine, it is Malchut, the attribute of kingship. In the realms of human experience, the Malchut is the speech. And in the general existence, Malchus is earth. In general, the material world, the last world, which is the physical world. In the physical world itself, that which is pure physics and not spiritual, which is earth. The objective, we said earlier, God wants to have a home in the world. In the Malchut, in the lowest level, that's where God wants to have his home, on earth itself. So the process of making this world holy is, number one, to come to the understanding that the earth is the purpose. Because for hundreds of years, Jews who were practicing Judaism and observing the commandments with diligence, missed the point. Now, it wasn't their fault. God didn't want them to know at that time that the point is not heaven, the point is earth. It was important then that the people were striving for heaven, and they believed, like most people believe in all other religions, that the purpose of being a good human being on earth is because if you live a good, moral, ethical life on earth, you're going to be rewarded with heaven. So earth is only a stepping stone to go to heaven. And Jews also believe that way. And when we say Jews that believe that, I don't mean ignorant Jews. I mean the greatest theologians and the greatest philosophers, Torah philosophers, believe that way. Why not? That makes sense. Heavens are so much greater. That's where God's light is revealed. Earth, at best, can have a little bit of an enlightenment. But how could you compare an enlightenment of a soul to a soul when it's stuck in a body? The body is heavy, chunky, and blocking. So the whole point was eventually to get out of the body and go to heaven. But somehow, in just 200-300 years ago, we found out that we were wrong all along. And we found out that there's a much deeper truth. The purpose is never to get to heaven. The purpose is to find the light that's on earth and to uncover its true nature. because in the earth is hiding, as we discussed in the earlier class, the biggest secret. Earth is hiding the biggest secret. And that's the meaning, Vayasuru as Eretz Canaan. You should go and bring out the advantage. That's what God is sending the spies. Go out and bring out the advantage that's on earth. Uncover its power. Reveal what's Vayasuru. Yasuru means more. Make the earth be more than heaven. But how do you do that? First, you have to channel it. First, you have to download heaven into earth, like rain that downloads heaven into earth, and then earth can reveal its power. First, the body has to surrender to the soul, and then the soul can elevate the body. You ever wonder, in Judaism itself, why was it that the earlier generations did not know the secret? And therefore, what did they do? They crushed their bodies, literally. The saintly people in the earlier generations went and mortified their bodies. Literally, they treated their bodies. They sent their bodies. They lived their bodies to boot camp. They broke the body like crazy through fasting, through difficult. Talking about people that were, not everybody did it, but people that wanted to live life to the ultimate and live an when I say live life, meaning a meaningful life, a life attached to God, went on every tiny mini infraction. Whenever the body acted up and got them to do even the tiniest little thing, they beat the body up to a pulp. That's the way it was. Claimed 200 years ago, 250 years ago, 270 years ago, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, and gave a shout that reverberated across the entire Jewish world. And he yelled, "Stop! Stop beating up the body." And he revealed the verse. He says, when you see your neighbor's donkey crouched under its load, will you refrain from helping it? Azev Taziv Imma, get down and help it. So he explains the neighbor's donkey means your own body. It's called donkey because it's coarse. In Hebrew, the word chamor means chomer. Only means corporality, coarseness. You find your body not complying with your spiritual aspirations. Your body is not into it. So what might you think? Like you would think, you know what? Let the body go jump in the lake. Let me just dismiss the body. Let me shut it down. And I'm going to serve God with my soul, not with my body. So the Baal Shem Tov says, no, Azev Taziv Imoy, work with your body. Pick your body up and work, train it. Train it to do God's will. Don't break it. Fix it. Guard, channel it. Channel it to the right things. And this revolutionized, this was the beginning of these teachings, that everything is really not about crushing the world, but serving God with the world and with the body, with the physical. The question is, did they get it wrong for thousands of years? So for Tulda Baal Shem Tov, they were all wrong, they missed the point. God forbid. They didn't miss the point, because just like in a field, what's the first thing you have to do with a field to get the field to be a productive field? First, you have to plow it. So the person who's plowing can't have too much sensitivities for the earth, because if he is so sensitive to how important the earth is, he's not going to plow it well. In other words, the first people, in order for them to be able to plow the body, to plow the physical, if they would have known the secret of how sacred the physical is, then they would never have really plowed it. The physical needed a beating. It needed a serious shake-up so that it can produce. After we've spent thousands of years breaking in the body through all the mitzvot that we've done with our body. Now, by the way, you'll say, well, what do you mean we? We're talking about humanity? No. You need a few hundred Jews doing this, and it changes the nature of existence, because we're all of the world we're all interlaced and interwoven with each other. So if you had, a couple of thousand Jews throughout history that worked their bodies, broke it in to be completely compliant to God's will by all what they did, that affected the world. It affected the entire existence, purifying the world, subconsciously, obviously. But it did its work. So they needed to do that. But then, and again, the spirit needed to dominate over the body. Because remember, the advantage of the body is after it submits to the spiritual. But once that is achieved, then we suddenly have to switch our entire mindset and start realizing there's something very unique about the body. And the physical is really the purpose of it all, not heaven. And we have to start paying attention to earth. And we have to start recognizing that everything is contained in our material selves. And we have to learn the delicate service of being within the physical world, connecting to God with the physical, through the physical, but not becoming enmeshed in it, because then it's not godly. That's a very delicate dance. So that's already the work of the later generations, pre-Messianic generations leading up to Mashiach, where we start changing our attitude. That's the meaning the Rebbe is speaking about over here. The spies go in, Vayaturu et Eretz Canaan. They start recognizing it. See, when we know today's days that the purpose is the physical, so we're able to put so much more effort into this particular work. Again, the earlier generations needed to do the plowing, but in the later generations, by knowing, in other words, we haven't yet transformed the physical, but by knowing the secret that there is in the physical world, how the potential of it is, and what's really there, once we'll extract the gold, once we'll extract the truth of the physical world, then makes it so much easier to get the work done. And that's what the Meraglim needed to do. By Yisrain Eretz Bakoyle, to bring out the advantage of earth. So now the spies needed to do that. Now we understand the relationship of the 28th of Sivan to Parsha Shalach. Because the theme of Parsha Shalach is taking the Jews out of the world of the spiritual, which was the desert, and starting the process of reshifting them to go into the land, which means shifting away from heaven-oriented service and getting into earth-oriented service, where we recognize that the purpose and everything is about cultivating the earth. So we can understand why that's coincides with the 28th of Sivan, because the 28th of Sivan is the power that God gave us to influence the earth, to elevate the earth, and ultimately to make the physical world into the garden that God wanted it to be to begin with. Now, just for one moment, because this is important for the talk, when the Rebbe talks about all the Sephirot, all the divine attributes, their ultimate destination is Malchus, we have to realize that the Rebbe is hinting to, you can see it clearly later in the talk. I'm not just making this up, this is evident. What the Rebbe is talking about is also about the seven people, seven tzaddikim that usher in the Messianic time. The Rebbe is speaking about him as the leader of Chabad, which Chabad is the brain, by the way. So Chabad is the brain of the Jewish people. The leader of Chabad is really the leader of the Jewish people. There were 7 Chabad Rebbes, which the Rebbe explains many times. They are the personification of the 7 divine attributes. As they are coming into the world to inspire the world as a preparation for the redemption. Just like before we went out of Egypt, before the first redemption, we had 7 super righteous individuals, starting with Abraham, Avram, Yitzchak, our patriarchs, going through the line of Levi, the third one, to Kahas, to Moshe, to Amram, to Moshe. Moshe is the 7th one in the lineage of great tzaddikim. So the Rebbe said it already in the first discourse when he became Rebbe, that I am the 7th. He didn't say. He said we. He spoke about we. Our generation is the 7th generation. But he knew he's being the leader of this, which is a preparation for, we're going to bring God down into this world. to complete the final redemption. So just like over there, the 7 righteous people are not just great men, but they are personifications. They're embodiments of divine attributes. So too these modern leaders were also the embodiment of these divine attributes. 6 of them are the masculine attributes. The 7th is the Malchut, which means he represents the vessel, earth itself. And who is that? It's the Rebbe himself. Now, if you take a look at everything about the 7th Rebbe, okay, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, I usually don't say his name, but I'm talking about that. We realize who I'm talking about. The Rebbe, his entire style was to be a recipient bowl for the previous teachings to come through him. What he was really doing is just being the mouth of revealing all the Rebbe. First of all, number one, he published the teachings from all of them. So many of their teachings were in manuscripts. They were never published. When the Rebbe took over the leadership of Chabad, there were very few Chabad books printed. I mean, more than in other places, because Chabad is a place of knowledge. There was a lot, but after the Rebbe had everything published, because that's what Malchus does. It reveals. Secondly, the Rebbe never ever spoke of himself as the Rebbe. He always saw himself just like almost like the funnel of the previous Rebbe. He always whenever he spoke about Rebbe, it wasn't him. It was always his predecessor. Why? Malchus is the moon, doesn't have any of its own light, so it's all his father. The Rebbe, if it would not even give blessings on his own. If you asked for a blessing, he said, "I will take it to the grave site of my father-in-law." None of the earlier Chabad Rebbeim behaved this way. If you asked them for a blessing, they gave a blessing in their name. They didn't say, "I'm going to go to my predecessor," because they represent the masculine light, which has its own energy. It can give. The Rebbe is just a recipient from all the earliers. That's the quality of Malchus. Also, if those who know, if you look at the Rebbe's discourses, all of his discourses, Hasidic discourses, which is the main function of a Chabad Rebbe to teach Torah, the Rebbe's Torah is very different than all the others. All the others, even though each one based on the previous teachings of the previous, it was like a build-up, yet they don't quote from earlier. A little they quote, but it's not the entire teaching is quotations from earlier. If you look at the Rebbe's discourse, every discourse, this is what the Alter Rebbe said, this is what this one said, this one said, and it's almost like he's not saying anything of his own, yet he takes all of it, it flows into him, and by the time it exits the Rebbe, by the time the Rebbe completes the discourse, he reveals such depth in all that was said earlier. So there's nothing new, yet everything is new. It's exactly what Malchus does. It's like the womb takes everything in and produces the child on a whole new level, on ways we've never seen before, mind-blowing depth. But on the other hand, nothing new. But the Rebbe is basically saying in all of this that all the energies that have been flowing until now were meant to flow into the 7th generation. The Rebbe actually in a footnote later says, my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, his name is Yosef. You know why? Because he was corresponding to the first Joseph. And those who study Kabbalah know that Joseph is the 6th of the line of those of 6 of the great tzaddikim that are embodiment of the Sfirot. He is the attribute of Yesod. Yesod is what we said before, Kol, that gives to Malchus, gives to the recipient, gives to the woman. So the Rebbe said, my father-in-law is Yesod. He said it in the discourse over here. I'm sorry, in this talk, in footnote number 73. He says, "V'yadua shekvoi kedushes Mariachami Admor who keneged Sfiras HaYesod corresponds to the attribute of Yesod, and therefore his name is Yosef. Shu Midas HaYesod, which is Yesod, which comes after the 5 other midos which are the Keneged Chamisha Nesiim Sholafanav, corresponding to the 5 great luminaries that were before him, beginning the Alter Rebbe of Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya, the Mittler Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Reb Shmuel, or the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe Rashab, Reb Shalom Dovber. These are the 5. Plus the previous, these are the 6 masculine attributes. And with the, I love the Rebbe, like in a way where he's revealing, but yet in a bashful way. V'yesh loima, look at these words. V'yesh loima, we can say, shekol dairenu, all of our generation, ha'anoshim, noshim v'taf, the men, the women, and the children, Sfiras Malchus is the attribute of it. Instead of saying, and I am the embodiment of the Shekhinah, of the 7th attribute, which is the world. And that's why I reveal godliness across the entire world. And my emissaries are everywhere. And I'm making sure that every dark part of the world gets illuminated. You know, he gives the credit to the whole generation. He says, in our generation, we're the generation of Malchut. He's clearly implying it to himself, but this is the whole idea. And he's talking about the beginning of his leadership. The beginning of his leadership started in 1950. He's speaking 1941. But in 1941, when he came to, until then, he lived totally as a private person. He did secret missions for his father-in-law, but primarily no one really, he was very, very private. When he came to America in 1941, his father-in-law appointed him to be the head of Merkaz L'Inyanei Chinuch, which basically means the center for all matters of education, which meant educating the world, educating America and educating the world. So he then, when he came to the shores in America on the 28th of Sivan, it's when he was initiated into public service, which in a sense means he's taking over the reins. So that's the 28th of Sivan. The power that comes out when things come down into Malchut, when it comes all the way down to planet Earth. Like we said, the Torah, when does the Torah unleash its real power? Only when it's on Earth. When Torah is in heaven, it's nice, but the power of it is not unleashed until it comes down into the physical. And as the Rebbe explains, the real physical is going across the ocean to America, to the lower half of the world, and uncovering godliness from there. That's like the earth revealing its power. This is mind-blowing. And then he goes on in chapter 4 to actually start disseminating this exact idea, how the pre-Mashiach, the preparation for Mashiach, begins with the dissemination of Hasidus in general, and primarily as it relates to the 7th generation, which when the time it got down to the 7th generation and the Hasidic teachings, which are pre-Messianic teachings, were transported to America, only when it gets over here does it explode and it becomes exponentially more powerful. Why? Because the earth has the ultimate power, and it is rooted higher than all the other attributes before it. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning, this is one of those talks where the Rebbe parts the veil and he allows us to take a little peek at who he is. He's not hiding yet. He's revealing. It's really, really amazing. But what he's going to do over here is going to show us how powerful our generation is, how powerful each and every one of us are. I thought I'm going to get further, but this was good. This was a good introduction for everything else we're going to learn. Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we're going to continue with class number 4. I'm sorry, not class number 4, class number 3, which is chapter 4. Hopefully 5, 6, 7. I'm going to get done with this talk. Amazing talk. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful good night. Hopefully in the morning we'll be dancing with Mashiach already in the month of Tammuz. And Chodesh Tov Tov.